Kill 1. The stars burned cold and quiet over the Kestra system, a patch of space no human had ever seen until now. Far from Earth, past the colonies of Mars and the mining outposts near Jupiter, the exploration ship, Aurora Dawn, drifted slowly toward a small blue-green planet. It was the kind of world people dreamed about: oceans, clouds, and signs of life. Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge, arms crossed, watching the planet grow larger on the main screen. He was a calm man, not given to big speeches, but his crew trusted him. They had been together for 3 years, mapping dead stars and empty systems, and this was the first real hope they had found. Lisa Morgan sat at the science station, her fingers dancing over the console. She was the ship's xenolinguist, trained to talk to beings no one had ever met. Her dark hair was tied back and her eyes stayed fixed on the data streaming in. "Atmosphere is breathable," she said. "Nitrogen-oxygen mix close enough to Earth's. And there's structure down there, simple buildings, maybe villages. No energy signatures, no radio waves. They're pre-industrial." Chris Dawson leaned against the wall near the weapons panel. He was the tactical officer, young but sharp, with a habit of chewing gum when he was nervous. "So no guns, no ships, no threat," he said. "Just farmers and fishermen." "Exactly," Daniel said. "Which means we go down quiet. No armor, no weapons drawn. We're guests here." Paul Hayes, the chief engineer, grumbled from the back. "I still don't like it. What if they've got something we can't see? Poison plants, hidden predators?" "We'll take the standard biosuits," Daniel replied. "Full environmental seal, but no helmets unless needed. We want them to see our faces." An hour later, a small landing party beamed down to the surface. The air was warm and smelled like rain and wet soil. Tall grass swayed in the breeze, and in the distance, wooden huts with thatched roofs dotted a gentle slope. The people, humanoid, with smooth gray skin and large black eyes, paused in their work and stared. They didn't run. They didn't shout. They just watched. Lisa stepped forward slowly, hands open at her sides. She had practiced dozens of greeting gestures from Earth's history, bowing, waving, raising palms. She chose the simplest, a slow nod. One of the locals mirrored her. A child peeked out from behind a hut, then giggled. For a moment it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. Then the sky split open. A sound like tearing metal ripped through the air. The ground shook. Everyone looked up. A ship, sleek, black, and shaped like a blade, dropped from the clouds. It had no markings, no lights, just smooth armor that seemed to drink the sunlight. It hovered silently, then fired, not at the villagers, at the humans. Energy bolts slammed into the ground near Daniel's feet. The team scrambled for cover. Chris instinctively reached for his sidearm, a standard-issue pulse pistol set to stun. "Who the hell are they?" he yelled. Lisa's scanner beeped wildly. "Unknown vessel!" "No match in our database." The black ship opened a hatch. Figures dropped down, tall armored beings with insect-like helmets and glowing red visors. They moved in perfect sync, weapons raised. One of them pointed at the humans and spoke in a sharp, clicking language. Daniel raised his hands again. "We're not armed. We mean no harm." But the newcomers didn't care. One of them shoved a villager aside and stepped toward Chris. The alien's weapon hummed, charging for a shot. Chris panicked. He fired. The pulse round hit the alien square in the chest. The figure staggered, then collapsed. Smoke rose from the armor. Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then chaos. The other aliens roared, not in pain, but in fury. They opened fire. The villagers screamed and ran. Daniel shouted for retreat, but it was too late. 2 more aliens fell, caught in the crossfire as Chris tried to cover their escape. Back on the Aurora Dawn, alarms blared. Paul had already recalled the team the moment the shooting started. The transport beam yanked them back just as the black ship unleashed a barrage on their position. The landing site exploded in fire. On the bridge, Daniel was pale. "Casualties?" "None," Lisa said, breathing hard. "But we killed 3 of them." Chris stood frozen, his hand still gripping the pistol. "They were going to kill us," he whispered. "I had no choice," Paul shook his head. "Doesn't matter. First contact just turned into a massacre." Before anyone could respond, the ship's comms lit up. A message came through, not on any human frequency, but broadcast on every channel at once. It was audio only, but the voice was cold, mechanical, and filled with contempt. Species designation, human. Action recorded. Unprovoked aggression against Virex envoy. Verdict: guilty of interstellar hostility. Sentence: total eradication. Then came the words that would echo across Earth and every colony. Congratulations, you just declared war on the most deadly species alive. The bridge fell silent. Even the hum of the ship's engines seemed to quiet. Lisa's hands trembled as she pulled up what little data they had on the Virex. They're not in our records, she said. But look, there are rumors. Old trader logs. They say the Virex don't negotiate. They don't occupy. They wipe out entire civilizations for the smallest insult. One ship lost and they burn the planet. Daniel sat down heavily in the captain's chair. We fired one shot, one. And it was enough, Paul said grimly. Chris stared at the floor. I didn't know. No one did, Daniel said. But now they're coming. And they won't stop until we're gone. He activated the emergency beacon. A coded signal shot through the wormhole network racing toward Earth. It carried only 3 words. Virex. War. Prepare. Outside, the black ship lingered for a moment as if watching them. Then it vanished into the upper atmosphere, leaving behind smoke, fear, and a broken peace. The Aurora Dawn lifted off, engines straining. They had to warn the others. They had to run. But deep down, Daniel knew running wouldn't save them. The Virex were already on their way, and humanity had just made its first and possibly last mistake. Part 2. The Aurora Dawn limped through space, its hull scorched and its shields flickering. Inside, the mood was heavy. No one spoke much. Chris Dawson sat alone in the mess hall, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. He had fired one shot. One. And now an entire species was marked for death. Captain Daniel Brooks found him there, holding a cold cup of coffee he hadn't touched. We didn't know, Daniel said quietly, sitting across from him. Chris didn't look up. Does it matter? They're coming. And it's because of me. It's because of them, Daniel corrected. They attacked first. They treated us like enemies before we even spoke. But even as he said it, Daniel knew the truth. In the eyes of the Virex, humans had struck first. And in their world, that was all that mattered. Back on Earth, panic spread fast. The emergency signal reached Sol Command within hours. Fleet Admiral Elena Ruiz stood in the war room, surrounded by blinking screens and grim-faced officers. She had seen war before. Border skirmishes with rogue colonies, pirate raids near the asteroid belt. But this was different. This was extinction. Do we have any intel on the Virex? She asked. Almost nothing, replied Lieutenant Marcus Lee, a young pilot with sharp eyes and a quiet voice. A few fragmented logs from deep-range traders. They say the Virex control over 200 systems. They don't take prisoners. They don't leave ruins. They leave glass. Elena's jaw tightened. How long until they reach us? At their last known speed, 10 to 12 days, Marcus said. Maybe less if they open a direct wormhole. 10 days. Not enough time to build new ships. Not enough time to evacuate billions. Earth had defenses, orbital guns, drone swarms, a few battle cruisers, but nothing that could stop a full-scale invasion from a species that had conquered half the galaxy. Meanwhile, aboard the Aurora Dawn, Lisa Morgan worked without sleep. She had downloaded every scrap of data from the Virex transmission. The language was complex, built on clicks, tones, and layered meanings. But she found patterns. Buried in the broadcast was a code, a fleet coordination signal. It repeated every 6 hours like a heartbeat. They're rigid, she told Daniel and Paul in the science lab. Everything follows a pattern. Their ships move in perfect formation. Their messages use the same structure. Even their threats are scripted, Paul frowned. So they're predictable. In a way, Lisa said. They believe chaos is weakness. They think order wins wars. But that's their blind spot. If we can break their pattern, even for a second, they won't know how to react. Daniel nodded slowly. We need to see their plans. We need to know where they're coming from, how many ships, what their weak points are. Chris spoke up from the doorway. I can go. Everyone turned. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. I can take the scout pod. It's fast, it's quiet, and I know how to fly it without being seen. There's a Virex relay station near the edge of the Kestra system. If they're using it to coordinate, it'll have everything we need. It's suicide, Paul said. Staying here is worse, Chris replied. If we don't act, Earth dies. I caused this. Let me fix it. Daniel studied him for a long moment. Then he gave a single nod. You go. But you follow my rules. In and out in under 2 hours. No heroics. If things go wrong, you run. Understood? Chris nodded. Understood. That night he boarded the Shadow Mite, a tiny stealth pod no bigger than a shuttle. It had no weapons, no shields, just speed and a cloaking field powered by stolen alien tech from an old salvage mission. As the bay doors opened, stars stretched into streaks. Chris took a deep breath and shot into the void. The relay station hung in orbit around a dead moon, a spire of black metal humming with energy. Chris killed the engines and drifted, letting the pod's cloak absorb all light and heat. He waited, watched, listened. After an hour, a Virex patrol ship passed by, scanning the area. Chris held his breath. The ship moved on. He edged closer. The station had no visible guards. Why would it? No one had ever dared approach a Virex installation. He latched onto an access port and slipped inside. Inside, the air was cold and smelled like ozone. Walls pulsed with faint red light. He moved like a ghost, avoiding the few drones that floated through the corridors. In the central chamber, he found what he came for. A data core glowing softly. He plugged in a capture drive. Files poured in. Fleet logs, troop counts, attack routes. His heart pounded. They were sending 3 dreadnoughts, 12 cruisers, and over 200 fighters. Target, Sol system. Arrival, 9 days. Then he saw something worse. Footage, real footage. A planet burning. Cities melting. People running, screaming, vanishing in white fire. The Virex didn't just kill. They made examples. This was from a world that had fired on a Virex scout ship, just like Chris had done. He felt sick. But he kept downloading. Suddenly, alarms blared. A drone had spotted him. Red lights flashed. Doors slammed shut. Chris yanked the drive free and ran. He burst out of the station just as plasma fire lit up the darkness. The patrol ship had returned. He dove into the pod and slammed the throttle. The Shadow Mite shot away, weaving through debris. Shots tore past his hull. One clipped the rear fin, sending sparks flying. He didn't look back. He pushed the engine to its limit, heading for the wormhole jump point. He made it with seconds to spare. Back on the Aurora Dawn, the crew pulled him aboard. He was pale, shaking, but alive. He handed the drive to Lisa. She plugged it in. Everyone watched as the data unfolded on the screen. The scale of the coming attack was worse than they feared. But there was something else. Buried in the logs was a flaw. The Virex fleet relied on a single command frequency. If it was jammed even for a minute, their ships would fall out of sync. They're strong, Lisa said, but they're brittle. Daniel looked at Chris. You did it. Chris just nodded. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had seen hell and lived to tell about it. Now Earth had a chance. Not much of one, but a chance. And in war, that was everything. The clock was ticking. 9 days left. And humanity had just learned the most important lesson. The Virex could be beaten. Not with strength, but with surprise. Part 3. News of the Virex fleet spread like fire through the colonies. On Earth, cities emptied as people rushed to underground shelters. Factories ran day and night, building weapons no one had ever used before. But in a quiet research bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, a different kind of war was being planned. Not with guns, but with ideas. Dr. Nina Patel stood before a large screen filled with star maps and code. She was small, with tired eyes and a voice that never rose above a calm hum, but her mind moved faster than most supercomputers. She had studied alien behavior for 20 years, not to fight them, but to understand them. Now that knowledge might save humanity. The Virex War is a math problem, she told the group gathered around her. They believe every action has a reaction, every move has a counter. They expect us to line up our ships, fire in formation, retreat when damaged. They've fought 1,000 wars like that. They've never lost. Frank Torres, a retired admiral with a scar across his left eyebrow, leaned forward. So what do we do? We stop playing their game, Nina said. We act like humans. Marcus Lee, the young pilot who had delivered the first warning, raised his hand. What does that mean? It means we do the illogical, she said. We run toward danger. We fake retreats and then attack. We send empty ships as bait. We talk when we should shoot and shoot when we should talk. We confuse them. Zoe Ramirez, a cyber warfare expert with short black hair and a dry sense of humor, tapped her tablet. I can build signal ghosts. fake fleets that show up on their scanners. We use old freighters, wrap them in reflective foil, add some drone signals. From a distance, they'll look like battle groups. And I can mess with their comms, added a quiet engineer named Leo Grant. If their command frequency is as fragile as Lisa said, I can flood it with noise. Just long enough to break their rhythm. Frank nodded slowly. It's crazy, but it might work. They called it Project Wildcard. Not a plan, really. More like a collection of tricks, stunts, and desperate hopes. Over the next few days, teams across Earth and the colonies worked in secret. In orbit, crews welded scrap metal into decoy ships. On Mars, programmers wrote code that mimicked human panic. Random distress calls, fake surrender messages, even fake mutinies. All of it designed to look real but mean nothing. Lisa Morgan worked on the final piece. She sat in a soundproof room listening to hours of Virex speech patterns. She learned their honor codes, their insults, their sacred phrases. Then she wrote a message that sounded like a human surrender. But hidden in the tone and word order were deep cultural slurs. To a Virex ear, it wasn't just weakness. It was mockery. They'll think we're laughing at them, she told Daniel over a secure line. And if there's one thing their records show, it's that they hate being mocked more than anything. Back on the Aurora Dawn, repairs were almost done. The ship had been patched, rearmed, and fitted with new stealth tech. Paul Hayes had even rigged a solar flare detector after hearing Nina's theory about using natural space weather as cover. Chris Dawson trained with the boarding team. They practiced silent entries, data grabs, and quick escapes. But this time their mission wasn't to steal or destroy. It was to broadcast. We're going to hijack their own network, Chris explained to his squad. Once we're inside a Virex ship, we plug in a transmitter. We send everything we have, footage of their attacks, their lies, their cruelty, to every ship in their fleet, even the ones they forced to join them. Why would that help? Asked one of the Marines. Because not everyone in their empire wants to be there, Chris said. If we show them the truth, some might turn. Even one ship switching sides could break their line. 8 days passed, then 7. Earth's defenses were ready, or as ready as they could be. The real fleet hid in the shadow of Saturn's rings. The fake fleets drifted near Jupiter and the asteroid belt. Zoe's signals made it look like humanity was scattered, panicked, and divided. But they weren't. They were waiting. On the 6th day, the first Virex scout ship entered the outer edge of the Sol system. It scanned the decoys, saw the chaos, and sent a report back. The main fleet adjusted course, splitting into 3 groups to hunt down the fleeing human forces. Nina watched from the bunker as the Virex took the bait. They think we're weak because we're messy, she whispered. They don't realize mess is how we survive. Frank gave the order. Activate wildcard. Across the system, lights flickered on empty ships. Fake comms chatter filled the airwaves. A distress call from a destroyed colony ship begged for help near Neptune. Another message claimed Earth's government had collapsed. The Virex fleet responded exactly as predicted, sending ships to investigate, tightening their formation, preparing for a final strike on a broken enemy. But the humans weren't broken. They were coiled, ready to strike back in ways no empire had ever seen. And deep in the dark, the Aurora Dawn powered up its engines. Its crew knew the real battle hadn't started yet. This was just the setup. The trap was laid. Now they had to make sure the Virex walked right into it, because if Project Wildcard failed, there would be no second chance. Earth would burn, and no one would be left to remember their names. Part 4. The Virex armada entered the Sol system like a storm. 3 dreadnoughts led the way, each longer than a city, their black hulls swallowing starlight. Behind them came cruisers, fighters, and supply ships, all moving in perfect silence, in perfect order. They expected fear. They expected surrender. They did not expect chaos. The first sign something was wrong came near Jupiter. A Virex cruiser chased a human freighter into the asteroid belt. The freighter exploded, but not from weapons fire. It was rigged to blow, scattering reflective chaff that blinded sensors for 10 full seconds. In that time, 3 hidden human destroyers fired from behind icy moons. 2 Virex ships vanished in fire. High Overseer Krell aboard the lead dreadnought Iron Will snarled at the report. They used tricks like thieves, he growled to his second in command. No honor, no pattern. They are weak, the officer replied. They hide because they cannot fight. Krell wasn't so sure. But he pressed on. Earth was close, near Saturn, more confusion. Fake distress calls poured in from every direction. One claimed a human fleet was gathering near Titan. Another said Earth's president had fled to Mars. The Virex split their forces again, sending ships to hunt ghosts. Each time they arrived, there was nothing, just empty space and mocking silence. Then came the broadcast. It started as static on the Virex command channel. Then clear as day, footage played across every ship's screen. Cities burning, children running, a Virex commander laughing as his ship glassed a peaceful world. The message was simple. This is what you do. This is who you are, Krell roared in fury. Shut it off! But it was too late. On the fringes of the fleet, ships from conquered worlds, species forced to serve the Virex, began to hesitate. Some cut their comms, others drifted out of formation. Back near Neptune, the real battle began. Marcus Lee flew his interceptor through the planet's icy rings, dodging Virex patrols. His ship was small, fast, and loaded with EMP charges. He waited until a Virex cruiser passed close, then launched 3 charges on magnetic rails. They stuck to the hull. He counted down in his head, 3, 2, 1, and triggered them. A pulse of energy washed over the cruiser. Lights died. Engines stalled. For 30 seconds, the ship was blind and helpless. In that time, a human strike group tore it apart. On the Aurora Dawn, Daniel Brooks watched the battle unfold on his screen. So far, Project Wildcard was working. The Virex were angry, scattered, and confused. But Krell was still coming, and he was heading straight for Earth. Time for Phase 2, Daniel said. Chris Dawson suited up. His team would board the Iron Will during the chaos near Pluto. Their goal wasn't to kill Krell, but to plant a transmitter deep in the ship's core. Once activated, it would blast the truth about the Virex across every frequency, every language, every enslaved species in the fleet. The boarding pods launched under cover of a solar flare, a trick Paul Hayes had insisted on. The Virex sensors couldn't see through the radiation. The pods latched onto the dreadnought's underbelly like insects. Inside, it was dark and cold. Chris and his team moved fast, using stolen Virex codes to bypass doors. They fought only when necessary, using stun rounds to avoid noise. One Marine fell to a patrol drone, but the rest pressed on. They reached the core chamber. Chris jammed the transmitter into a data port. Uploading now, he whispered. Alarms blared. They'd been found. Go, Chris yelled. I'll hold them off. His team hesitated, but he shoved them toward the exit. He stayed behind, firing at the advancing Virex soldiers, buying seconds. The upload finished just as a blast knocked him down. He crawled to the escape pod, blood on his face, and launched just before the chamber sealed. The broadcast went live. Across the Virex fleet, screens lit up with images of their own cruelty. Ships from the Zenthari, the Kolar, the Myrex, all species the Virex had crushed, saw their homeworlds burning. One by one, they turned their weapons not on Earth, but on their Virex masters. The battle turned in minutes. Krell watched in horror as his left flank collapsed. Traitors! He screamed. Destroy them all. But it was too late. Human ships, small and fast, darted through the chaos, striking weak points. Decoy fleets lured Virex ships into minefields. Zoe Ramirez flooded their command channel with noise, breaking their coordination completely. Then Daniel Brooks did the unthinkable. He flew the Aurora Dawn straight at Krell's dreadnought, not to fight, but to run. He aimed for the edge of a massive solar flare erupting from the sun. Virex ships couldn't fly through plasma storms. Their shields would fail. But human ships built for rougher conditions could survive it for a little while. Krell, blinded by rage, followed. You will not escape me, human. The Aurora Dawn dove into the flare. Fire wrapped around its hull. Alarms screamed. Paul Hayes worked frantically to keep the engines alive. Behind them, the Iron Will entered the storm, and its shields flickered out. Krell's ship shuddered. Systems failed. He tried to pull back, but momentum carried him deeper. Daniel waited until the last second, then cut hard to starboard, skimming the edge of the flare. The Aurora Dawn emerged scorched but flying. The Iron Will did not. It tumbled out of the plasma, engines dead, hull cracked. Human fighters swarmed it, disabling its weapons. Boarding teams secured the bridge. High Overseer Krell was found alive, trapped in his command chair. His armor melted to his skin. He glared at Daniel with burning eyes but said nothing. The rest of the Virex fleet, leaderless and betrayed, broke apart. Some fled, some surrendered. A few fought to the end. By the time the sun rose over Earth the next day, the battle was over. Humanity had won, not with bigger guns or stronger ships, but with chaos, courage, and a single, stubborn refusal to play by the rules. And as the survivors gathered in orbit watching the wreckage drift, they knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. Part 5. The silence after the battle was louder than the war. Debris floated in wide rings around Neptune and Pluto, twisted metal, shattered hulls, and the quiet graves of thousands. Human rescue ships moved slowly through the wreckage, pulling survivors from escape pods and listing hulks. On Earth, people stepped out of shelters for the first time in weeks. The sky was clear, the sun was warm, and for now, they were safe. Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the observation deck of the Aurora Dawn, watching a recovery team tow the crippled Virex dreadnought toward lunar orbit. It looked like a dead whale dragged through deep water. Inside, High Overseer Krell sat in a reinforced cell, silent, refusing food, refusing to speak. He had not said a word since his capture. Lisa Morgan visited him once. She brought no threats, no questions, just a data pad showing images of the worlds the Virex had destroyed. She left it with him and walked away. Later, the guards reported he stared at it for hours. Back on Earth, celebrations were quiet. There were no parades, no grand speeches. Too many had died. Entire colonies near the outer rim were gone. Families waited for names on recovery lists that never came. But there was relief. And there was pride. Not loud, but deep like roots after a storm. In the Senate chamber, Daniel stood before the world's leaders. He wore his uniform, but it was stained and torn from battle. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. "We didn't win because we're stronger," he said. "We won because we're messy. We make mistakes. We panic. We argue. We do things that don't make sense." The Virex thought that was weakness. But it's how we survive. It's how we adapt. He paused, looking at the faces before him, some hopeful, some still afraid. They came to erase us because we broke their rules. But the universe doesn't follow rules. It follows life. And life is unpredictable. After the meeting, Frank Torres found Daniel on a quiet balcony overlooking the city. "You should take some time off," the old admiral said. "You've earned it." Daniel shook his head. "This isn't over." Krell said something before they took him away. Lisa translated it. He said, "You have not defeated us. You have only taught us to fear you." Frank's face darkened. "Fear makes enemies smarter. Or more dangerous," Daniel replied. Across the galaxy, word of the Virex defeat spread fast. Species that had lived under their boot for generations began to rise up. Revolts flared in a dozen systems. Some sent messages to Earth, not of thanks, but of alliance. They wanted help. They wanted weapons. They wanted to make sure the Virex never returned. Nina Patel worked with diplomats to answer those calls. She insisted on one rule: no conquest, no control. "We don't become what we fought," she told them. "We offer help, not orders." Meanwhile, Chris Dawson stood at the edge of a memorial garden being built in Geneva. Names of the lost were carved into smooth stone. Crew from the Aurora Dawn, colonists from Epsilon 9, soldiers from the outer defense lines. He placed a small metal token near one name, his friend, the Marine who fell during the boarding mission. He didn't speak. He just stood there breathing. Later, he visited Marcus Lee in the hospital. Marcus had been injured during the Neptune run, burns on his arms, but alive. He grinned when Chris walked in. "Heard you almost got cooked inside that Virex ship." "Almost," Chris said. "But I made it out." "Good," Marcus said. "Because we're gonna need you." This was just the first fight. Chris knew he was right. The Virex Empire was wounded, not dead. Somewhere in the dark, their leaders were regrouping, learning, planning. And now they knew humans didn't fight fair. But neither did life. On Mars, engineers began building new ships, not just warships, but fast scouts, medical frigates, and communication hubs. On Luna, scientists studied Virex tech not to copy it, but to understand its limits. And in schools across Earth, children learned a new lesson. Strength isn't just power. It's cleverness. It's heart. It's the will to keep going when everything says you should fall. One evening, Daniel sat alone in the Aurora Dawn's ready room. The ship was due for decommissioning, too damaged to fly again. But he couldn't leave yet. He ran a hand over the console, remembering every alarm, every close call, every moment of doubt. Paul Hayes walked in with 2 cups of coffee. "Last flight's over," he said, handing one to Daniel. "For this ship, maybe," Daniel said. "But not for us," Paul nodded. "They're already talking about a new class of explorers, faster, smarter, ready for whatever's out there. And if the Virex come back?" Daniel asked. "Then we'll be ready," Paul said. "Not with the same tricks. With new ones. Because that's what we do." Outside the viewport, Earth turned slowly in the starlight. Blue, fragile, alive. It had faced the deadliest species in the galaxy and stood its ground. Not with perfection. Not with order. But with stubborn, messy, beautiful humanity. And somewhere far away, in a cell of cold steel, Krell stared at the wall and whispered words no one heard. But if they had, they would have understood the truth. Fear cuts both ways. The war had changed everything. Not just for Earth, but for the whole galaxy. Humans were no longer just another species. They were the ones who broke the rules. The ones who refused to die quietly. The ones who turned chaos into a weapon. And as long as even one human drew breath, that would never change.